Right, time now to speak to the Conservatives. Delighted to say that the Shadow Foreign Secretary, Dame Priti Patel, is here with me. A very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Let's start with Palestine and whether or not they deserve to have a state recognise. At the headline, do you think Palestine should ultimately be recognised as a state?
Well, in due course, yes, but not right now. This is not the right time to be doing this for so many reasons. We still have hostages in captivity. We still have Hamas, a terrorist organisation, running amok around Gaza. And I'll be very frank with you, I just don't think the British government has done enough in recent months. I've pressed them something like 22 times in the House of Commons on what the plan is. What are they doing to get more aid in? Are they actually in talks with our partners such as the United States, the Qataris, around getting Hamas out of Gaza and developing a proper plan? And we've never had any clear answers. And now what we saw yesterday, and I've seen this in Parliament for too long now over recent months, we've seen Keir Starmer just capitulate effectively to the pressure from his backbenchers. The one thing I would say about the Labour Party is that they've been consistent on this. They're backbenchers, not so much their front bench, the government. They've been calling for recognition of Palestine in an almost unconditional way, without conditions. And effectively, that is what Keir Starmer has said yesterday. He has capitulated to them. It is politics. And what we'd rather see is a proper, meaningful plan for the recognition of Palestine in the right way, where the future governance of Palestine is absolutely mapped out. This government has not played a role in doing that, and I think that's where we should be.
Has this always been your party policy? Was it your policy in government to ultimately recognise Palestine as a state?
It has been our policy, consistently so. But the point being, at the right time and in the right way. We know that the PA, the Palestinian Authority, has failed in terms of its own governance. Israel left Gaza back in 2005 and the PA came in, the Palestinian Authority, and they failed, and then Hamas came in. So this is ultimately about the governance and the security that can lead to a lasting, sustainable peace in Palestine to provide that two-state solution. We've not heard about that at all from this government. We don't know what role they're playing. They're not very public about that. And one other thing that I would add is that, I've had many conversations, obviously, with the diplomatic and international community. A few months ago, I even met with the President of the World Bank and even the multilateral institutions, the same bodies that we pay for through our taxes. They are working up sustainable plans for governance around Palestine. And yet this government, and I've asked them, they're not even saying what their role is in working through those plans.
Both Israel and the US say that yesterday Prime Minister Starmer was rewarding Hamas. Do you agree with that, or is that a step too far to say that?
Well, no, I actually think what we saw yesterday with Keir Starmer's comments, he was placing conditions on Israel. And I saw a little bit of your interview with Heidi Alexander earlier on, the government minister. She said this is not about Hamas. I'm afraid it is about Hamas. Hamas is a terrorist organisation. It is a jihadist organisation that has massacred and murdered people in Gaza, as well as the atrocities around October the 7th. They are effectively being let off right now by saying we're going to effectively recognise Palestine without any conditions on them. Yes, the government says there's no role for Hamas in the future. Well, we're all saying that. But the point is, they're in government. They should have a plan to ensure that Hamas is not rewarded, has no future role. And it's the same on aid. When you look at the catastrophic situation on aid, and I've pressed the government on this many, many times, the British government is saying, oh, it's all the United Nations. The United Nations must be the only body that delivers aid. Well, I'm sorry, but that's the same United Nations which basically had its own representatives and employees involved in the atrocities on October the 7th and effectively have helped Hamas have access to aid while starving people in Gaza. That is not responsible, and we also pay for that aid, and I think the British government should be really transparent here, and they should have come up with alternative plans.
That is, of course, strongly rejected by the UN. You're obviously, understandably, very critical of Hamas. Are you critical of Benjamin Netanyahu in terms of contributing, even if not triggering, but contributing to the situation in Gaza?
Well, of course, it's a situation none of us want to see. So we're very clear about that. It's the same when it comes to the settlement and the settler violence that is taking place. That is not right. It is not acceptable. And it doesn't help lasting peace. But at the same time, the statements and condemnations that we consistently see and hear from the British government, it's not helped anybody. It's not helped feed people in Gaza. And it certainly hasn't opened up new land routes to get aid in, which, by the way, the previous Conservative government did manage to achieve that.
I want to talk a little bit about the online safety bill. Presumably, you don't want to overturn it. as the party that brought it in?
It's too, I'm afraid, to make statements about overturning the bill. I'm afraid that's very lazy and that's not responsible. That's not what responsible politicians should be saying at all. Now, I was Home Secretary many years ago when we started the work on the Online Safety Act, as it now is. It was a draft bill and it went through many iterations. It's very complicated. It is not straightforward in terms of working with the technology companies. It's now the responsibility of this government to find practical ways to protect children online. I think the safety of children online has to come first. I've seen some horrific things in my time in government as the Home Secretary, ranging from the most appalling abuse of children. Our National Crime Agency have been involved, all sorts of things. So the actual functioning of the bill, the structure of the bill, that's the right way to go forward in terms of legislation. We have a regulator. The government now has to work with that regulator to make it work. This has to become a workable bill. And if we, as an opposition, need to go back and run the slide rule through that piece of legislation, the Act of Parliament, we'll do that in a responsible way because we're concerned about the safety and protection of children online, and that is a fundamental principle of that bill. How do we protect people?
So clearly you don't think it should be repealed as reform does. That said, do you think that Nigel Farage is on the side of predators, on the side even of people like Jimmy Savile?
Well, I heard those comments yesterday from, well, I think it was Peter Carl and Nigel Farage's reaction. I'm not going to get involved in that because, quite frankly, that's for those two now to square that circle and different apologies.
With all due respect, I've asked you about it.
I don't think it's appropriate. I don't think it's appropriate. I really don't. How does a comment like that help to keep children safe? The focus of responsible politicians is to find solutions. In the same way when it comes to the conflict in the Middle East, we have to find solutions to these difficult problems. Being in government is hard. Putting together legislation is difficult. Operationalising legislation is equally as hard. One thing I would say about the government minister that made those comments, that's an absolute distraction. He should be getting on and doing the job of fixing that legislation.
Dame Priti Patel, good to see you. Thanks for joining us.